My name is Claire, and for 10 years, I thought I had the perfect marriage. Ryan and I met during our college years at Northwestern, fell madly in love, and got married when I was 25. Now, at 35, we owned a beautiful colonial house in Naperville, Illinois, complete with a white picket fence and a golden retriever named Max. I worked as a marketing coordinator for a local firm, while Ryan managed operations at a logistics company downtown. Our life looked picture perfect from the outside, and for the longest time, it felt that way too. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our weekend traditions of farmers' market visits and Netflix binges. Every morning, Ryan would kiss my forehead before leaving for work. And every evening, we'd share dinner while discussing our days. It was the kind of steady, comfortable love that romance novels rarely write about. But real marriages are built on. But exactly 3 weeks ago, something shifted. It was subtle at first, like a whisper of change that I couldn't quite place. Ryan started coming home later than usual, claiming his boss was pushing for overtime on a major project. His explanations made sense. The logistics industry is demanding, and I knew his company had been pursuing a big contract. Yet something felt different about the way he delivered these explanations, almost rehearsed, like he'd practiced them during his commute home. What really caught my attention was how he'd started showering immediately after work, something he'd never done in our entire marriage. When I asked about it, he laughed it off, saying he felt grimy after long days at the office. But Ryan had worked the same job for 5 years, and sudden hygiene changes felt suspicious. Even Max seemed to sense the shift, following Ryan around the house with confused eyes, whimpering softly when his favorite human seemed distracted and distant. The first real alarm bell rang on a Tuesday evening when Ryan's phone buzzed during dinner. He glanced at the screen, and I caught a flash of something in his expression. Panic mixed with excitement, like a teenager caught passing notes in class. He quickly flipped the phone face down and launched into an overly detailed story about office politics that felt like a smokescreen. "Sorry, just work drama," he said, but his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. Later that night, I heard him on the phone in his study, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. When I knocked and entered with coffee, he practically jumped out of his skin before quickly ending the call. "Just my brother," he explained, talking about Mom's birthday plans. But I knew Ryan's family dynamics intimately. He barely spoke to his brother except during holidays, and their mother's birthday wasn't for another 6 months. The lie hung between us like smoke, acrid and unmistakable. Sleep became my enemy as my mind raced with possibilities I desperately didn't want to entertain. I'd lie awake studying Ryan's face in the moonlight, memorizing the features I'd loved for a decade. The small scar above his left eyebrow from a childhood accident, the way his mouth curved slightly even in sleep, the laugh lines that had deepened over our years together. This was the man who'd held my hair back when I had food poisoning during our 2nd year of marriage, who'd surprised me with a weekend getaway to Door County for our 5th anniversary, who still left little love notes in my lunch bag. How could I suspect him of betrayal? But doubt is insidious, creeping into the spaces between heartbeats, poisoning the very foundation of trust we'd built together. I tried to rationalize every strange behavior, every unexplained absence, every mysterious phone call. Maybe I was being paranoid, letting work stress color my perception of our relationship. Maybe this was just a rough patch that every long-term couple experiences. But then came the weekend that shattered my remaining illusions. Ryan, who had treasured our Saturday morning pancake tradition for 10 years, suddenly announced he had to work. On a Saturday. "A big client presentation on Monday," he explained. But he was dressed too nicely for office work. His good cologne, the shirt I'd bought him for Christmas, shoes that were definitely not his usual weekend sneakers. When I offered to pack him lunch or suggested meeting for dinner afterward, he declined both with excuses that sounded hollow. The way he avoided my goodbye kiss, turning his cheek at the last second, felt like a physical slap. I spent that Saturday in a fog of anxiety, jumping every time my phone buzzed, hoping for a check-in that never came. When he finally returned at nearly 8 o'clock, he was unusually chatty, almost manic in his enthusiasm about mundane office tasks. But there was something else. A lingering scent I couldn't identify. Something floral and expensive that definitely wasn't his usual cologne. The paranoia began consuming me in ways I'd never experienced. I found myself analyzing every word he spoke, every micro-expression that crossed his face, every deviation from our established routines. His sudden interest in upgrading his wardrobe felt like he was trying to impress someone new. The way he'd check his phone constantly, even during our conversations, made me feel invisible in my own home. Social media became a minefield as I scrutinized every female colleague who'd liked his posts, every comment from women I didn't recognize. I hated the woman I was becoming, suspicious, jealous, constantly on edge. But I couldn't stop the spiral of doubt that had hijacked my rational mind. Friends noticed my distraction during our Thursday night book club, asking if everything was okay, but I couldn't voice my fears. Saying them would make them real, and I wasn't ready for that reality. By the end of that third week, I was operating on pure adrenaline and very little sleep. My work performance was suffering as I struggled to concentrate on client presentations, while my personal life felt like it was disintegrating. Ryan and I had always prided ourselves on our communication, our ability to work through problems together. But now I felt like I was living with a stranger who wore my husband's face. The comfortable silences that had once felt peaceful now felt loaded with secrets. Every "and I love you" felt potentially hollow. Every gentle touch might be born of guilt rather than genuine affection. I was drowning in my own insecurities, desperately hoping for a sign that would either confirm my worst fears or prove that I was losing my mind over nothing. What I didn't know was that the truth would be more shocking than anything my paranoid imagination had conjured, and it was waiting for me in the most ordinary place. Our kitchen sink. Monday morning brought a new level of scrutiny that I couldn't control, and I found myself doing things that the old Claire would have found despicable. I started checking Ryan's pockets when he showered, scrolling through his phone when he left it unattended, even Googling private investigators in the Chicago area. Every fiber of my being rebelled against this behavior, but the uncertainty was eating me alive from the inside out. That's when I discovered the receipt that nearly stopped my heart. Tucked in his wallet, a dinner bill from Romano's, the upscale Italian place downtown where we'd celebrated our first anniversary. The date was from the previous Thursday, when he'd claimed to be working late on spreadsheets. 2 meals, 2 glasses of wine, a total of $127.50. The romantic implications of that restaurant choice felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Romano's wasn't where you grabbed a quick bite with male colleagues. It was where you took someone you wanted to seduce. I spent hours staring at that receipt, memorizing every detail as if it held the secrets to our marriage's destruction. The timestamp showed 8:47 p.m., well past normal business dinner hours. The itemized list included their signature tiramisu, something Ryan had only ever ordered there with me, calling it our dessert. The thought of him sharing that intimate tradition with another woman made me physically nauseated. I imagined him sitting across from someone younger, someone who made him feel alive in ways I apparently no longer could. Did they hold hands across the candlelit table? Did he tell her the same stories about his childhood in Wisconsin, his dreams of traveling to Ireland? The thought of our most personal conversations being recycled for someone else's benefit sent waves of nausea through my body. I found myself researching the restaurant online, reading reviews, studying their menu, as if understanding the ambiance might somehow explain away this betrayal. Tuesday brought a decision that I knew crossed every line of trust and dignity I'd ever maintained. During my lunch break, I drove to Ryan's office building under the pretense of surprising him for lunch. I'd done this maybe twice in our entire marriage, so I knew it would seem unusual, but I needed to see him in his work environment, needed to observe his interactions with female colleagues. The lobby was bustling with typical corporate energy, and when I asked the security guard to call up to Ryan's department, the few minutes I waited felt like hours. When Ryan appeared in the elevator, his face went through a rapid succession of emotions: surprise, confusion, and what looked unmistakably like panic, before settling into a smile that seemed just a touch too bright. "Claire, what are you doing here?" His voice carried an octave higher than usual, and he kept glancing around the lobby as if expecting someone else to materialize. The hug he gave me felt performative, like he was putting on a show for invisible observers. When I suggested we grab lunch at the deli across the street, he claimed he'd already eaten, at 11:30 a.m., before the lunch crowd had even formed. His explanation about emergency meetings felt rehearsed, just like all his other recent explanations. As we stood there making awkward small talk in his office building lobby, I noticed how he kept checking his phone, how his eyes darted toward the elevator, how he seemed desperate to end our conversation. The man I'd been married to for 10 years was treating me like an unwelcome stranger, and the realization hit me like a physical blow when he finally escaped back to his floor, claiming urgent deadlines. I stood in that lobby feeling like I'd just been dismissed by my own husband. The security guard even asked if I was all right, apparently noticing my obvious distress. Walking back to my car, I felt like I was moving through thick fog, everything around me muted and surreal. This couldn't be my life. This couldn't be my marriage. But the evidence was mounting like a prosecution case against the man I'd loved since college. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, crying in a way I hadn't cried since my father died. These weren't gentle tears of sadness. They were the ugly, gasping sobs of someone whose entire world was collapsing. Other people walked past my car, going about their normal Tuesday routines, completely unaware that someone's life was disintegrating just feet away. I called in sick for the rest of the day, something I'd only done twice in 3 years, and drove aimlessly around Chicago, trying to imagine what my life would look like as a divorced woman at 35. That evening, Ryan came home with flowers, grocery store daisies, not even my favorite roses, not even from a real florist. The gesture felt like an insult wrapped in cellophane, a cheap attempt to assuage guilt that he didn't think I was worth a real effort to address. "Just wanted to surprise my beautiful wife," he said. But his smile didn't reach his eyes, and he couldn't maintain eye contact while delivering what sounded like a line from a bad romantic comedy. I thanked him and put the flowers in water, all while screaming internally at the obviousness of his guilt. Did he think I was stupid? Did he think a $5 bouquet would somehow erase the expensive dinner receipt, the late nights, the way he'd practically sprinted away from me at his office? The whole gesture felt like he was following some handbook on managing suspicious wives, checking off boxes to throw me off the scent. As I arranged those pathetic flowers in a vase, I realized I was standing at a crossroads that would define the rest of my life. I could confront him directly, demand explanations, and force the situation into the open where we'd have to deal with whatever truth lay beneath his behavior. Or I could continue this maddening detective work, gathering evidence while slowly losing my sanity. The third option, the one that scared me most, was that I could simply accept this new reality and try to salvage whatever remained of our marriage. But looking at those grocery store daisies, symbols of his half-hearted attempts to manage my suspicions, I knew I couldn't live in this limbo anymore. Something had to give, and soon, before I lost myself completely in this maze of doubt and paranoia. The woman staring back at me from the kitchen window reflection wasn't someone I recognized anymore. Hollow-eyed, suspicious, constantly on the verge of tears. And I refused to let Ryan's secrets destroy who I'd always been. By Thursday of that week, I was operating on nothing but caffeine and sheer determination to uncover the truth. Sleep had become impossible as my mind raced through every scenario, every possible explanation that didn't involve betrayal. I'd moved to our guest room, claiming I had a cold, but really I couldn't bear lying next to him while wondering whose hands had touched him during his mysterious absences. The physical distance felt like small protection against the emotional devastation I sensed was coming. Every morning, I'd look in the mirror and see a stranger, someone with dark circles under red-rimmed eyes, someone whose hands shook while applying concealer. My coworkers had stopped asking if I was feeling all right, probably assuming I was dealing with some personal crisis I didn't want to discuss. They weren't wrong, but the scope of the crisis was beyond anything they could imagine. That morning brought the announcement that would push me over the edge. Ryan declared he'd be working late again, this time for a crucial client dinner that could make or break the quarterly numbers. But this time, something was different in his delivery. His hands were actually shaking as he buttered his toast, and when he thought I wasn't looking, I caught him practicing facial expressions in the reflection of our coffee pot, like an actor rehearsing for a performance. He'd already laid out his clothes for the evening, his best suit, the cologne I'd given him for our anniversary, even the cufflinks his grandmother had left him. Who wears family heirloom cufflinks to a business dinner? The level of preparation felt like he was getting ready for the most important night of his life. And the fact that it apparently had nothing to do with me was devastating. I made a decision that morning that I knew would haunt me regardless of what I discovered. I called in sick to work, my third time in 2 weeks, and spent the day following Ryan. I felt like a character in a bad thriller movie, sitting in my car outside his office building, wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap like some amateur private investigator. The shame of what I was doing burned in my chest, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know where he went, who he met, what was so important that he'd risk our marriage to keep it secret. When he left his building at 3:30 p.m., hours before his supposed client dinner, my heart started racing. I followed his car through downtown Chicago traffic, staying several cars back, feeling like I was about to witness the moment my marriage officially ended. Ryan drove to a part of town I didn't recognize, eventually pulling into the parking lot of what looked like an event planning company. Through the large windows, I could see him talking animatedly with a woman in a business suit, gesturing excitedly while she took notes. They spread papers across a table, and I watched my husband's face light up with genuine joy, an expression I hadn't seen directed at anything involving me in weeks. The woman showed him fabric samples, what looked like menu options, and even photographs of floral arrangements. My blood ran cold as I realized what I was witnessing. This wasn't a business meeting. This was Ryan planning some kind of romantic event with another woman. The level of detail, the obvious excitement, the careful attention to every element. This was a man planning something special for someone he loved, and that someone clearly wasn't me. I sat in that parking lot for 2 hours, watching my husband plan what I assumed was either a romantic getaway or possibly even a proposal to his mistress. The woman, tall, blonde, everything I wasn't, seemed to hang on his every word. They laughed together, shared what looked like champagne samples, and at one point, she actually hugged him. The casual intimacy of that embrace felt like watching my own execution. When they finally finished their meeting, Ryan looked happier than I'd seen him in months. He practically skipped to his car, checking his phone with that same secretive smile I'd noticed lately. I followed him home, staying far enough back that he wouldn't notice, my mind racing with the implications of what I'd witnessed. This wasn't just an affair. This was a man planning a future with someone else. That evening, when Ryan came home claiming his client dinner had gone well, I felt like I was living in an alternate reality. He was unusually affectionate, kissing my cheek, asking about my day, even suggesting we watch a movie together. But all I could see was him hugging that blonde woman. All I could think about was the joy on his face as he planned whatever romantic surprise awaited her. When he excused himself to take a work call in his study, I heard him speaking in the same hushed, excited tones I'd observed all day. "Everything's perfect," I heard him say. "She'll never see it coming." The words hit me like physical blows. She'll never see it coming. Was he planning to leave me? Was this elaborate planning session about how to break the news of his affair? Or worse, was he planning to propose to her while still married to me? As I sat alone in our living room, surrounded by 10 years of shared memories, wedding photos, vacation souvenirs, the throw pillows we'd picked out together last Christmas, I realized that tomorrow would bring the confrontation I'd been both dreading and anticipating. I couldn't pretend anymore. Couldn't live in this purgatory of suspicion and doubt. The evidence was overwhelming. The mysterious behavior, the expensive dinners, the secret meetings with beautiful event planners, the obvious joy he felt about something that had nothing to do with our marriage. Tomorrow, I would demand the truth, whatever it cost me. Because living in uncertainty was slowly killing the woman I'd always been, and I refused to let Ryan's deception destroy me completely. The decision felt both terrifying and liberating, like standing at the edge of a cliff knowing you had to jump, but having no idea what lay at the bottom. But anything was better than this limbo of lies and half-truths that had become my daily existence. Friday morning arrived with an almost supernatural tension, like the air before a thunderstorm. Ryan was practically vibrating with nervous energy as he got ready for work, humming under his breath and checking his phone every few minutes with barely contained excitement. He kept glancing at me with this strange expression, part guilt, part anticipation, like someone harboring the world's biggest secret. When I asked if everything was all right, he just kissed my forehead and said today was going to be very special. The word hung between us like a threat, and I felt my stomach drop as I imagined what kind of special day he might be planning with his blonde event planner. His phone buzzed 3 times during breakfast, and each time he checked it with that secretive smile that had become so familiar and so painful. "Big day at the office," he said, but his voice carried the excitement of a child on Christmas morning. After Ryan left, I found myself pacing through our house like a caged animal, unable to focus on anything resembling normal Friday morning activities. Every room held memories that now felt tainted. The living room where we'd planned our future, the kitchen where he'd surprised me with breakfast in bed, the study where we'd dreamed about traveling to Europe together. How had we gone from planning a shared future to whatever this nightmare had become? I tried to work from home, but concentration was impossible when every few minutes I'd remember another piece of evidence, another moment of deception. Around noon, my sister Emma called from Milwaukee, and I almost broke down completely. "You sound terrible," she said, and I realized I did sound terrible. Hoarse from crying, exhausted from sleepless nights, defeated in a way I'd never experienced before. I almost told Emma everything right then. The secret meetings, the mysterious dinners, the growing certainty that my marriage was ending. But something held me back. Maybe pride, maybe the desperate hope that I was wrong about everything. Instead, I made excuses about work stress, lies that came frighteningly easily after watching Ryan perfect the art of deception. After we hung up, I realized that his behavior was changing me too, turning me into someone who lied to people I loved, someone who couldn't trust her own perceptions anymore. The woman I'd been 6 months ago would have been horrified by the person I was becoming, but that woman hadn't been married to a man who came home smelling like guilt and carrying receipts for romantic dinners with other women. By 3 o'clock, I'd made a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. I was going to come home early and wait for Ryan, force the confrontation that would finally end this torture of uncertainty. I wanted to look him in the eyes when I presented my evidence. The receipt from Romano's, the knowledge of his secret meeting with the event planner, all the lies and deceptions of the past 3 weeks. Maybe there was still a chance to save our marriage if I approached it with love instead of accusations, if I gave him an opportunity to explain before jumping to the worst possible conclusions. I spent the drive home rehearsing different approaches, different ways to start the conversation that would determine whether we spent the weekend working on our marriage or planning its end. I pulled into our driveway at 4:15 p.m., noting that Ryan's car wasn't there yet, which was normal for a Friday afternoon. Our house looked exactly the same as it had that morning. Same blue shutters, same garden we'd planted together, same home sweet home, welcome mat. But as I walked through our front door, everything felt different, charged with the electricity of impending revelation. I decided to make coffee and start dinner early, create a warm atmosphere that might encourage honest conversation when Ryan arrived. The normalcy of these domestic activities felt both comforting and surreal, like I was playing house while my real life crumbled around me. I kept rehearsing what I wanted to say, how I wanted to present my evidence without destroying any chance of reconciliation. Walking into the kitchen to start the coffee, I stopped dead in my tracks. There, sitting in our sink like a smoking gun, was a wine glass with a perfect imprint of bright red lipstick around the rim. Not my lipstick. I hadn't worn red since our wedding day. and this was a bold, dramatic shade I would never choose. My hands started shaking as I picked up the glass, studying the lip print like it was evidence in a murder trial. The wine glass was from our wedding set, the crystal stemware we'd received as a gift and saved for special occasions. The sight of another woman's lipstick on our wedding crystal felt like the ultimate violation, a desecration of everything sacred about our marriage. How could he bring her here, to our home, to the kitchen where I made his coffee every morning? The reality hit me like a physical blow to the chest. This wasn't paranoia or insecurity. This was concrete proof that another woman had been in my house, drinking wine from my wedding crystal, leaving her mark on my life. I could feel my legs getting weak, and I had to grip the edge of the counter to keep from falling. All those weeks of wondering, all those sleepless nights questioning my own perceptions, all those moments of hoping I was wrong, they were over. Ryan had brought another woman into our home, into the space we'd created together, and the audacity of it was almost as devastating as the betrayal itself. I stood there holding that wine glass, staring at the evidence of my marriage's destruction, and felt something inside me break in a way I knew would never fully heal. This was the moment everything changed, the moment our life together officially ended, even if we hadn't said the words yet. But then I heard something that made my blood freeze, the sound of Ryan's key in the front door, followed by his voice calling out, "Claire, I'm home!" But there was something different about his tone, something excited and anticipatory that didn't match someone who'd just been caught in the ultimate betrayal. I was still standing there, holding the damning wine glass, when he appeared in the kitchen doorway. His face immediately registered the scene. Me, with tears streaming down my face, holding the evidence of his infidelity, looking like someone whose entire world had just collapsed. But instead of the panic or guilt I expected, instead of stammering denials or weak explanations, Ryan's face broke into the biggest smile I'd seen from him in months. He actually started laughing, not nervous laughter or guilty laughter, but genuine, delighted laughter that completely short-circuited my anger-primed brain. "Oh my God, Claire," he said, pulling out his phone to show me he was recording. "You should see your face right now. This is absolutely perfect." Perfect? I stared at Ryan like he'd lost his mind, still holding the wine glass between us like evidence in a trial. "You think this is perfect? You think destroying our marriage is perfect?" But Ryan was practically bouncing with excitement, his phone still recording, that enormous grin never leaving his face. "Claire, honey, it's my lipstick," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small Sephora bag. "I bought it yesterday. Mac Ruby Woo. The sales associate said it was the most dramatic shade they had. Do you know how embarrassing it is for a 37-year-old man to ask for advice on red lipstick?" He removed the tube from the bag, and it was indeed the exact shade I'd found on our wine glass. My brain struggled to process this information, like trying to solve a puzzle where all the pieces had suddenly changed shape. "I've been planning this for 3 weeks. Claire, your surprise birthday party. I know your birthday isn't until next month, but I wanted to throw you the biggest celebration you've ever had, and I needed time to coordinate with everyone." The wine glass slipped from my numb fingers, but Ryan caught it with reflexes quick despite his laughter. I felt like I was floating outside my body, watching this scene unfold between two strangers who happened to look like my husband and me. The late nights, the mysterious phone calls, the client dinners. I was organizing everything for your party. That dinner at Romano's, I was meeting with their event coordinator to plan the menu. Those phone calls you heard? I was talking to your sister Emma, your college friends, your co-workers. Everyone's sworn to secrecy about the surprise. The pieces started falling into place like a jigsaw puzzle solving itself in fast motion. But my mind was still reeling from 3 weeks of emotional torture. "The event planning company," I whispered, remembering yesterday's surveillance mission. "I followed you there. I saw you with that blonde woman." Ryan's eyes widened in surprise. Then he burst into even harder laughter. "You followed me. Oh my God, Claire, that's amazing. That was Jennifer, the party planner. We were going over final details, the decorations, the catering, the flowers. She's been helping me plan this for weeks. He showed me his phone, scrolling through dozens of messages and photos related to party planning. I even documented the whole process to show you later how much effort went into this surprise. I wanted to create a video of the entire planning process as part of your gift. But why the lipstick test? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, as the full scope of my misunderstanding became clear. Ryan's expression became more serious, as he realized the true extent of what his secrecy had put me through. I wanted to see how you'd react to finding evidence of another woman in our house. I thought it would be funny to document your response. Maybe get a little jealous reaction that we could laugh about later. But Claire, I can see now that this wasn't funny at all. You look like you've been through hell. He set down his phone and pulled me into the tightest hug of our entire relationship, and I could feel him trembling as he realized how much pain his harmless test had caused. As we stood there in our kitchen, holding each other surrounded by the evidence of my paranoia and his good intentions, I felt every emotion possible simultaneously: relief, embarrassment, love, anger, joy, and residual heartbreak all swirling together in a cocktail that left me speechless. I started laughing and crying at the same time, which only made Ryan hold me tighter. "You absolute idiot," I managed to say between sobs and laughter. "I thought you were having an affair. I thought our marriage was over. I've been planning what to pack, wondering if I'd have to move back in with my parents, researching divorce lawyers online." Ryan's face immediately became stricken as he understood the true magnitude of what his surprise planning had put me through. The joy of his successful surprise was completely overshadowed by the realization of my suffering. "Claire, I am so incredibly sorry," he whispered into my hair, his voice thick with emotion and genuine remorse. "I was so focused on making this surprise perfect that I never considered how my behavior might look to you. You must have been going through absolute hell these past 3 weeks. And I caused all of that pain for the sake of a party." As we held each other in our kitchen, I realized that this experience had taught us something crucial about our marriage that we'd never fully understood before. We'd both made dangerous assumptions. I'd assumed the worst about his behavior without communicating my fears, and he'd assumed I'd trust him no matter how suspicious he acted. Those assumptions had nearly destroyed us, but they'd also revealed the depth of our love for each other. "The woman at the event planning company," I said, pulling back to look at his face. "And when I saw you hugging her, when I saw how happy you looked planning something that I thought had nothing to do with me." Ryan cupped my face in his hands, his eyes filled with tears I'd never seen before. "Every moment of joy you saw was me thinking about you, Claire. Every smile, every laugh, every excited gesture was because I was imagining your face when you saw what I'd planned. That hug." Jennifer had just shown me the final photos of the venue setup, and I was so thrilled with how beautiful it looked that I couldn't contain myself. "Everything I've done for 3 weeks has been about loving you, about celebrating you, about showing you how much you mean to me." The sincerity in his voice, the raw emotion in his eyes, made me realize that while his methods had been misguided, his intentions had been pure love. "Next time you want to plan a surprise," I told him, still crying and laughing simultaneously, "maybe don't make me think you're having an affair. My heart can't take another 3 weeks like this." Ryan promised never again to put me through such emotional torture for the sake of a surprise. And as we stood there in our kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the worst and best day of our marriage, I realized that this story would become one of our favorites to tell for the rest of our lives. We'd learned that love isn't just about trust. It's about communication, about considering how our actions affect the people we love most, and about the fact that sometimes the most devastating moments can become the foundation for the strongest bonds. Our marriage had been tested by secrets and assumptions, but it had emerged stronger, built on a new understanding of how precious and fragile trust really is. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't the surprise itself, but discovering that your love is strong enough to survive even your worst fears. In marriage, trust isn't just about believing in your partner. It's about communicating openly, considering how your actions affect the person you love most, and remembering that the strongest relationships are built not on perfection, but on the courage to be vulnerable with each other, even when it's difficult.